Most people believe they make decisions logically. They think they observe a situation, weigh the options, and then choose the best outcome. This belief feels comforting. It makes you feel in control. But it is not how the brain actually works. The truth is far more interesting and far more useful once you understand it. Your brain does not begin with logic. It begins with emotion, instinct, and pattern recognition. Decisions happen fast, often before you are consciously aware of them. Logic usually arrives later, not to decide, but to justify what has already been chosen. This is why smart people still make poor decisions. This is why experience does not always prevent mistakes. And this is why learning to outsmart situations begins with understanding how decisions truly form. The human brain evolved for survival, not accuracy. In early environments, speed mattered more than precision. If something felt dangerous, hesitation could be fatal. So the brain developed shortcuts. These shortcuts are called heuristics. They allow the brain to make rapid judgments with limited information. These shortcuts still run your life. When you walk into a room, you instantly sense tension or comfort. When you meet someone, you feel trust or caution before they speak. When a situation unfolds, you lean toward action or avoidance almost automatically. These reactions feel like intuition. Intuition is not magic. It is rapid pattern recognition based on past experience, emotion, and belief. The problem is that intuition is only as accurate as the patterns it was trained on. If your past experiences involve stress, manipulation, or unpredictability, your intuition may be biased toward fear or defensiveness. This is where most people lose advantage. They assume their instincts are always correct. They are not. Your brain makes decisions through three primary forces: emotion, habit, and perception. Logic is secondary. Emotion assigns value. Habit provides the default response. Perception filters information. Whichever force is strongest in a moment determines your choice. Emotion acts first. It answers the question, does this feel safe, rewarding, or threatening? Habit answers, what do I usually do here? Perception answers, what am I noticing, and what am I ignoring? Logic steps in later to explain the outcome. If you want to outsmart people or situations, you must learn to intervene before emotion and habit finalize the decision. This requires slowing the process internally, even when things move fast externally. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming others are acting rationally. Most behavior is emotionally driven, even when it looks calculated. People defend egos, seek comfort, avoid pain, and pursue validation far more than they pursue truth. Understanding this gives you leverage. When you know that decisions are emotional first, you stop arguing facts with feelings. You stop trying to win through logic alone. You begin addressing the emotional layer underneath. This is how influence actually works. Your own brain also resists change. It prefers familiar outcomes even if they are not optimal. Familiar feels safe. New feels risky. This is why people repeat patterns they claim to hate. The brain chooses predictable pain over unpredictable uncertainty. To outsmart situations, you must recognize when your brain is choosing familiarity over effectiveness. Another critical factor in decision-making is cognitive load. When the brain is tired, overwhelmed, or stressed, it defaults to shortcuts even more aggressively. Under pressure, people rely on habits, biases, and emotional reactions. This is why stress reduces intelligence. Outsmarting situations means managing your internal state before trying to manage outcomes. A calm brain sees more options. A reactive brain sees only threats. People who consistently stay one step ahead are not smarter in the traditional sense. They are regulated. They keep their nervous system stable, so the thinking part of the brain stays online. This is a massive advantage. Another truth most people miss is that perception shapes reality. The brain does not see everything. It filters aggressively. What you notice is determined by belief, expectation, and emotion. If you expect hostility, you notice threat. If you expect opportunity, you notice openings. If you expect manipulation, you see patterns others miss. Outsmarting situations requires expanding perception. You must notice what others overlook. Silence, tone, timing, inconsistencies, emotional shifts. Most people talk too much, think too fast, and observe too little. Observation is power. The brain also hates uncertainty. When outcomes are unclear, it rushes to closure. This creates premature decisions. Outsmarting requires tolerance of uncertainty, the ability to pause without panicking. Pausing feels uncomfortable. That discomfort is where clarity lives. People who rush decisions often believe they are decisive. In reality, they are escaping discomfort. Those who wait strategically often win because they let more information surface. Another element of decision-making is identity protection. People make choices to protect how they see themselves. Pride, shame, fear, and ego heavily influence behavior. When identity feels threatened, logic disappears. This applies to you and everyone else. Outsmarting others does not mean exploiting them. It means understanding these drivers so you are not manipulated by them and do not react blindly. You stop taking behavior personally. You start reading patterns. Your brain also uses confirmation bias. It seeks information that supports what it already believes and ignores what contradicts it. This makes people feel certain even when they are wrong. Certainty is not accuracy. To outsmart situations, you must challenge your own assumptions regularly. Ask, what am I assuming here? What might I be missing? What would someone with no emotional stake see? These questions interrupt bias. Another critical skill is separating signal from noise. Many situations include emotional noise, opinions, urgency, and distraction. The real leverage point is often quiet, subtle, and overlooked. Calm attention finds leverage. People who outsmart consistently are not louder, faster, or more aggressive. They are patient, observant, and composed. They let others reveal themselves. They allow situations to unfold just enough before acting. They do not chase control. They position themselves intelligently. Understanding how the brain really makes decisions gives you the foundation. From here, you can begin to read people, predict reactions, and respond strategically rather than emotionally. This is not about manipulation. It is about mastery. Mastery of your own mind first. Because once you can regulate your internal process, you stop being predictable. And unpredictability combined with calm awareness is powerful. In the next part, you will learn how to understand human behavior and hidden motives. You will see why people do what they do even when they do not understand it themselves. This is where awareness deepens, and where you begin to truly outsmart any person or situation. Most people believe they understand why others behave the way they do. They listen to what is said, observe surface actions, and take things at face value. But human behavior rarely starts on the surface. It begins beneath awareness driven by needs, fears, desires, and emotional patterns that most people do not consciously recognize. If you want to outsmart any person or situation, you must learn to look beneath behavior rather than react to it. Behavior is the visible result of invisible forces. People are motivated far less by logic and far more by emotional needs. The strongest of these needs are safety, approval, control, significance, and belonging. Almost every action can be traced back to one or more of these drives. When you recognize which need is active, you can predict behavior with surprising accuracy. 4. Example, when someone seeks constant attention, they are not being dramatic. They are seeking validation. When someone dominates conversations, they are often protecting status. When someone avoids decisions, they may be avoiding responsibility or fear of failure. Understanding this changes everything. You stop judging behavior and start reading it. Hidden motives do not mean malicious intent. They mean unconscious drivers. Most people are not aware of why they act the way they do. They simply follow emotional impulses and then justify them later with logic. This is why explanations often feel inconsistent. People say one thing but do another. Their words reflect what they want to believe. Their actions reflect what they feel. Outsmarting situations means trusting patterns more than promises. One of the most powerful insights is that people protect their self-image above almost everything else. Even truth is often sacrificed to preserve identity. When identity feels threatened, behavior becomes defensive, aggressive, or withdrawn. Defensiveness is a signal. When someone becomes unusually defensive, they are not reacting to the situation. They are protecting how they see themselves. Recognizing this allows you to disengage from pointless arguments. You stop trying to win facts against feelings. You either reassure identity or step back until emotion settles. Another hidden motive is control. Many behaviors are attempts to regain control in environments where people feel powerless. Micromanagement, manipulation, passive aggression, and rigidity often come from a lack of inner control. When you see control-seeking behavior, you respond differently. You do not escalate power struggles. You remain calm, grounded, and firm. Calm unsettles control-driven behavior. People also act from fear of rejection. This fear drives people-pleasing conformity, dishonesty, and silence. When people fear rejection, they avoid conflict, even at personal cost. This fear shapes behavior. Quietly recognizing fear-based behavior helps you read what is not being said. Another hidden motive is the need for certainty. People dislike not knowing. When uncertainty rises, behavior becomes rigid, extreme, or impulsive. People cling to opinions, identities, or routines to feel grounded. Rigidity often signals uncertainty. When you recognize this, you stop taking extreme behavior personally. You understand it as an attempt to feel safe. Status is another powerful driver. People constantly assess where they stand relative to others. Status threats trigger strong reactions. Praise elevates. Criticism wounds. Behavior changes dramatically. When status feels challenged, understanding this helps you navigate social and professional environments strategically. You protect dignity when needed and avoid unnecessary challenges. Another key insight is that emotions drive communication. Tone, body language, and timing matter more than content. People often say less through words than through how they say them. If you listen only to words, you miss the message. Outsmarting others means listening to what is underneath. Hesitation, enthusiasm, defensiveness, avoidance, excitement, these signals reveal true motivation. People also act from habit. Habitual behavior feels automatic and comfortable. People resist change even when it benefits them because change threatens routine. Routine feels safe. Understanding habit allows patience. You stop expecting immediate change from others. You adjust expectations and strategies accordingly. Another hidden motive is avoidance of pain. People will lie, delay, withdraw, or attack to avoid emotional discomfort. They may not realize this consciously. Avoidance often appears as procrastination or conflict. When you see avoidance, you stop pushing harder. You address the fear beneath it. One of the most important principles is this: people behave consistently with how they feel, not how they think they should feel. This is why advice often fails. People also seek mirroring. They unconsciously match energy, posture, and emotion. This is why emotional states spread. When you stay calm, others often regulate around you. Your state influences behavior. Understanding humans' behavior also requires awareness of your own motives. Outsmarting others starts with not being blind to yourself. You notice when ego, fear, or validation drives your choices. Self-awareness prevents. Projection. Projection causes misreading. Another hidden driver is the need to be seen as good, competent, or justified. People will rationalize harmful behavior to preserve this image. Rationalization hides motive. Outsmarting means seeing through justification. People also respond strongly to perceived fairness. When people believe something is unfair, emotion escalates. Fairness is subjective but powerful. Understanding this allows you to frame situations in ways that reduce resistance. Another insight is that people reveal priorities through consistency. What they repeatedly do matters more than what they occasionally say. Patterns tell the truth. Outsmarting. People does not mean controlling them. It means not being controlled by misunderstanding. When you see motives clearly, you stop reacting emotionally. You choose responses strategically. Strategy requires calm. Calm requires understanding. When you understand human behavior, you stop being surprised. Surprise creates reaction. Predictability creates advantage. You do not need to confront every motive. Sometimes the smartest move is observation. Sometimes it is reassurance. Sometimes it is disengagement. Wisdom is choosing the right response. Understanding hidden motives also helps you protect yourself from manipulation. Manipulation relies on emotional blind spots. Awareness removes leverage. When you see the tactic, it loses power. Another powerful realization is that people rarely change when confronted. They change when they feel safe to change. This understanding prevents frustration. You adjust expectations. Another hidden motive is the desire for significance. People want to feel that they matter. When this need is unmet, behavior becomes exaggerated. Recognizing this allows empathy without submission. Understanding behavior also helps you manage conflict. You separate issue from identity. You address needs rather than arguments. Needs drive behavior. Address needs, and resistance drops. One of the most advanced skills is reading silence. Silence can signal fear, calculation, resentment, or reflection. Context reveals meaning. Silence is communication. Outsmarting situations means staying observant during silence rather than rushing to fill it. Understanding human behavior is not about becoming cynical. It is about becoming accurate. Accuracy replaces judgment. Judgment clouds perception. When perception is clear, you see options others miss. You stop reacting to surface drama. You respond to underlying reality. In the next part, you will learn how to think faster without acting emotionally. You will learn how to stay mentally sharp under pressure without losing control. This is where strategy becomes instinct, and where you stay one step ahead consistently. Speed is often mistaken for intelligence. People who respond quickly, speak decisively, and act without hesitation are seen as sharp, confident, and in control. But speed without regulation is not intelligence. It is impulse. True mental advantage comes from the ability to think fast while remaining emotionally neutral. This is the difference between reaction and strategy. Most people think slowly because their minds are cluttered with emotion. Anxiety, hesitation, ego, and fear create internal noise. This noise consumes mental bandwidth. When pressure appears, the brain struggles to process information efficiently. Thinking faster does not mean forcing your mind to move quicker. It means removing what slows it down. Emotion is the biggest drag on speed. When emotions spike, the brain shifts resources away from reasoning and toward. This makes thinking feel rushed, yet ineffective. You may feel urgent, but not clear. You may act quickly, but regret it later. Outsmarting situations requires speed with clarity. The first principle is understanding that emotional regulation increases cognitive speed. A calm nervous system processes information faster than a reactive one. This is why people who remain calm under pressure often seem smarter. They are not overwhelmed. Thinking faster begins with controlling internal state before controlling thought. When your breathing slows, posture steadies, and attention grounds, the mind organizes naturally. Organization creates speed. Another critical element is reducing internal dialogue. Most people narrate everything internally. This narration consumes attention. When something happens, the mind immediately starts explaining, judging, and predicting. This narration slows processing. High-level thinkers reduce narration. They observe first. They let information register without commentary. Commentary comes later if needed. Silence speeds perception. Another skill is separating data from emotion. In any situation, there are facts and there are feelings. Emotional minds mix the two. Strategic minds separate them. What happened? What I feel about it? These are not the same. When you separate them, thinking becomes cleaner. You can acknowledge emotion without letting it distort analysis. Thinking faster also requires recognizing patterns quickly. Pattern recognition is faster than analysis. Instead of analyzing each situation from scratch, you identify similarities to past experiences. This does not mean assuming outcomes. It means recognizing structure. Structure guides response. Another way to think faster is to simplify criteria. Under pressure, people try to consider too many variables. This creates paralysis. Strategic thinkers narrow criteria to what actually matters. What is the goal? What is the risk? What is the leverage? 3 questions often beat 30 thoughts. Thinking faster also involves trusting first impressions without obeying them blindly. First impressions are rapid pattern recognition. They provide clues, not conclusions. You notice them. You do not act on them immediately. This balance preserves speed and accuracy. Another powerful technique is delaying response slightly. This sounds counterintuitive, but brief pauses increase speed. A pause allows emotional spikes to settle and information to surface. Even to seconds matter. The pause separates stimulus from response. Thinking faster also means avoiding over-explanation. Over-explaining is a sign of insecurity. It wastes time and weakens position. Clear, concise responses preserve authority. Less words often mean more control. Another critical skill is prioritizing information flow. Not all information deserves equal attention. Emotional minds focus on loud, dramatic details. Strategic minds focus on relevant details. Relevance beats intensity. Thinking faster also requires emotional detachment from outcomes. When you are attached to winning approval or being right, thinking slows. Fear of loss clouds judgment. Detachment clears perception. This does not mean you do not care. It means you are not desperate. Desperation is slow. Another element is managing cognitive load. Multitasking reduces speed. Strategic thinkers focus fully on one situation at a time. Focused attention processes faster than scattered attention. Thinking faster also means recognizing when not to think. Some situations require action, not analysis. Overthinking delays necessary movement. Wisdom is knowing when thinking helps and when it hinders. Another powerful technique is framing. How you frame a situation determines how fast you understand it. Instead of seeing chaos, you look for leverage points. Where is control possible? Where is influence strongest? Where is disengagement smartest? Framing simplifies complexity. Thinking faster also involves staying physically grounded. The body influences the mind. When the body is tense, thinking becomes rigid. When the body is relaxed, thinking becomes fluid. Relaxation increases adaptability. Another critical factor is ego management. Ego wants to react, prove, defend, and dominate. Ego-driven thinking is fast, but inaccurate. Strategic thinking is neutral. Neutrality improves precision. Thinking faster also requires letting go of perfection. Waiting for the perfect answer wastes time. Strategic thinkers choose good enough and adjust. Adaptation beats perfection. Another important skill is anticipating reactions. Instead of focusing only on your next move, you consider how others are likely to respond. This anticipation speeds decision. Making predictions saves time. This requires understanding human behavior, which you learned earlier. Thinking faster also involves practicing under low-stakes conditions. You do not wait for high-pressure moments to train. You practice calm thinking during minor stress. Training builds reflex. Another powerful method is mental rehearsal. You imagine scenarios and practice calm responses. The brain treats rehearsal as experience. Experience increases speed. Thinking faster also means trusting your ability to recover from mistakes. Fear of mistakes slows thinking. When you trust recovery, you act decisively. Decisiveness improves. Outcomes. Another element is reducing emotional reactivity through exposure. The more you face challenging situations calmly, the less reactive you become. Reduced reactivity increases speed. Thinking faster also requires clear values. When values guide decisions, you do not debate endlessly. Values act as shortcuts. Shortcuts increase speed. Another technique is learning to recognize when someone is trying to rush you. Rushing is often a tactic to bypass your thinking. Strategic thinkers resist artificial urgency. You slow down when others rush. This reversal creates advantage. Thinking faster also involves knowing when to disengage. Not every situation deserves your cognitive energy. Strategic disengagement preserves mental resources. Preserved resources think faster later. Another important factor is confidence in uncertainty. When you accept not knowing everything, thinking becomes flexible. Rigidity slows thought. Flexibility adapts. Quickly thinking faster without acting emotionally is not about suppressing emotion. It is about preventing emotion from hijacking the process. Emotion can inform. Emotion cannot lead. This discipline allows you to respond intelligently even in chaotic environments. As you practice this skill, you begin to notice something powerful. Others react. You respond. Others rush. You pause. Others escalate. You remain neutral. Neutrality gives you time. Time gives you advantage. In the next part, you will learn how to apply this thinking in conversations and conflict. You will learn how psychological awareness allows you to navigate communication without being pulled into emotional traps. This is where intelligence becomes visible and where strategy starts shaping outcomes. Most people lose advantage not because they lack intelligence, but because they lose awareness in conversation. The moment emotion enters dialogue, clarity drops. Voices rise, defenses activate, and the real objective disappears. Conversations turn into battles of ego rather than exchanges of information. If you want to outsmart any person or situation, you must learn to stay psychologically aware when others lose it. Conversation is not just about words. It is about power, emotion, timing, and perception. What is said matters far less than why it is said and how it is delivered. People rarely communicate to exchange truth. They communicate to protect identity, release emotion, gain control, or seek validation. Understanding this shifts how you listen. When conflict appears, most people immediately defend their position. Defense narrows perception. Awareness expands it. Psychological awareness means you are watching the conversation from the outside while participating within it. You are both inside and above the interaction. This dual awareness is powerful. The first rule of psychological awareness is this: emotion drives conversation more than logic. When someone is emotional, they are not processing information accurately. Facts bounce off. Tone matters more than content. This is why arguing facts during emotional conflict almost never works. Outsmarting conflict means addressing the emotional layer before the logical one. You do this not by agreeing, but by regulating the space. Calm tone, slower pace, and grounded posture signal safety. Safety allows the thinking brain to re-engage. Your calm becomes the stabilizing force. Another key insight is that people reveal more through reactions than statements. Strong reactions signal sensitivity. Sensitivity points to underlying beliefs, fears, or insecurities. When someone reacts strongly, ask yourself what was touched. This awareness prevents personalization. Personalization is the fastest way to lose control. Another critical skill is listening for motive rather than content. Ask internally, what does this person want right now? Validation, control, reassurance, dominance, escape. Once you identify motive, the conversation makes sense. You stop being confused. For example, if someone wants validation, facts will not satisfy them. If someone wants control, explanation will feel like resistance. If someone wants reassurance, silence will feel threatening. Understanding motive allows strategic response. Psychological awareness also involves managing your own triggers. Everyone has emotional hooks, topics, tones, or behaviors that trigger reaction. If you do not know yours, others will find them unintentionally or intentionally. Self-awareness is defense. When triggered, you feel urgency, heat, or the need to prove something. This is your signal to pause. Pausing restores choice. Choice restores advantage. Another powerful skill is strategic silence. Silence creates space. It forces others to fill gaps, often revealing more than they intended. Most people fear silence. Those who master it gain information. Silence also prevents reactive speech. Words spoken in emotion cannot be taken back. Another aspect of awareness is recognizing conversational traps. Traps include baiting, blame-shifting, guilt-framing, and false urgency. These tactics push you into defensive positions. Awareness allows refusal. You do not need to respond to every statement. You choose what deserves response. This selection is power. Another important principle is that winning an argument often means losing influence. People remember how they felt more than what was said. If someone feels humiliated, defeated, or unheard, they resist later. Strategic thinkers prioritize influence over ego victory. Influence requires respect. Psychological awareness also involves reading nonverbal cues. Body language microexpressions, tone shifts, and pacing reveal internal state. Someone may say they are fine while posture signals tension. Trust signals over statements. Signals are harder to fake. Another critical element is emotional mirroring. People unconsciously mirror energy. If you escalate, they escalate. If you slow, they often slow. Your state shapes the interaction. This means self-regulation is not just personal, it is tactical. Another advanced skill is reframing. Reframing changes how a statement is perceived without directly opposing it. You shift meaning rather than argue content. For example, instead of disagreeing, you might acknowledge intent and redirect focus. Reframing reduces resistance. Another key aspect is timing. The same message delivered at the wrong time fails. Psychological awareness includes knowing when not to engage. Emotional peaks are poor moments for resolution. You wait until regulation returns. Patience wins. Another important insight is that conflict often arises from unmet needs rather than disagreement. People fight about surface issues while deeper needs remain unspoken. Address the need and the conflict softens. Another powerful skill is staying outcome neutral. When you are attached to a specific outcome, you become rigid. Rigidity is visible and exploitable. Neutrality keeps options open. Another awareness principle is recognizing projection. People often project their own feelings onto others. Accusations often reveal internal states. This insight prevents unnecessary defense. Another subtle skill is managing pace. Fast speech signals anxiety or aggression. Slow, measured speech signals confidence and control. Control of pace controls tone. Another important element is avoiding absolute language. Words like always, never, everyone, no one escalate conflict. Awareness means using precise language. Precision reduces escalation. Another key is understanding that not all conflicts need resolution. Some need boundaries. Psychological awareness includes recognizing when resolution is impossible. You disengage without guilt. Another advanced technique is naming the process rather than the content. You describe what is happening in the interaction calmly. For example, I notice this conversation is getting tense. This shifts attention to regulation. Process awareness interrupts escalation. Another critical skill is humility. You allow the possibility that you may be wrong. This openness reduces defensiveness on both sides. Openness invites dialogue. Another aspect is managing expectations. Expecting others to behave rationally under emotion creates frustration. Awareness accepts human limitation. Acceptance preserves calm. Another powerful insight is that people often test boundaries unconsciously. They push to see what is tolerated. Calm, firm boundaries signal self-respect. Self-respect commands respect. Another element is choosing battles wisely. Psychological awareness helps you decide which conversations matter. Not everything deserves your energy. Energy management is strategic. Another advanced skill is emotional containment. You allow others to express emotion without absorbing it. You remain present without merging. Containment stabilizes the space. Another critical practice is post-interaction reflection. You review interactions without judgment. What worked, what did not, what was revealed. Reflection sharpens skill. Psychological awareness also means recognizing manipulation attempts. Manipulation relies on emotional hooks: fear, guilt, urgency, flattery. Awareness breaks the spell. Once seen, manipulation loses power. Another subtle insight is that people often reveal truth unintentionally. Inconsistencies, tone shifts, and over-explanations signal discomfort. Discomfort reveals leverage. Another key is maintaining internal alignment. You do not say things that violate your values to avoid conflict. Self-betrayal weakens confidence. Integrity strengthens presence. Another important practice is grounding before difficult conversations. Preparation reduces reactivity. Preparation increases control. Another awareness principle is that conversations are dynamic. You adjust in real time rather than sticking rigidly to scripts. Flexibility adapts. Another advanced insight is understanding emotional contagion. You choose not to catch others' emotions. You observe instead. Observation preserves clarity. Another powerful skill is asking better questions. Questions direct attention. Strategic questions reveal motives without confrontation. Questions are tools. Another key is recognizing when someone wants to be heard, not fixed. Offering solutions prematurely creates resistance. Listening builds trust. Another subtle but powerful awareness is recognizing your own need for validation. This need can pull you into unnecessary conflict. Letting go restores neutrality. Psychological awareness transforms conversations from emotional battles into strategic exchanges. You stop reacting. You start reading. You become harder to provoke. You become harder to manipulate. You become harder to outmaneuver. In the next part, you will learn how to outsmart manipulation without becoming manipulative. You will learn how to protect yourself while staying ethical, calm, and in control. This is where awareness becomes defense, and where intelligence becomes unshakable. Manipulation works only when it goes unnoticed. The moment you see it clearly, its power weakens. Most people are not manipulated because they are naive or unintelligent. They are manipulated because manipulation targets emotion, not logic. It bypasses awareness and triggers automatic responses. To outsmart manipulation, you do not need to become manipulative yourself. In fact, becoming manipulative often backfires and erodes trust, self-respect, and clarity. The real advantage comes from perception, boundaries, and emotional regulation. Manipulation is influence without consent. It occurs when someone attempts to control your thoughts, emotions, or actions while disguising their intent. This disguise is what makes manipulation effective. It often appears as concern, urgency, flattery, guilt, or authority. Understanding the most common manipulation tactics is the first step. One of the most frequent tactics is guilt. Guilt manipulation makes you feel responsible for someone else's emotions or outcomes. Statements like "if you cared, you would," or "after everything I have done for you," subtly shift responsibility. Guilt works because humans are wired for connection. We fear being seen as selfish or uncaring. Outsmarting guilt means recognizing ownership. You are responsible for your actions, not others' emotional reactions. You can care without complying. Another common tactic is urgency. Artificial urgency pushes you to act before thinking. Limited time offers emotional pressure or crisis framing are designed to bypass reflection. Urgency reduces discernment. When urgency appears, you slow down intentionally. Real emergencies withstand brief pauses. Manipulative urgency collapses under calm delay. Another manipulation method is flattery. Excessive praise lowers defenses. When ego is activated, awareness drops. You feel special, chosen, or superior, which makes you easier to influence. Flattery is not kindness. It is often leverage. Outsmarting flattery means noticing intent rather than enjoying the feeling. Appreciation is balanced and specific. Manipulative flattery is exaggerated and timed. Another tactic is playing the victim. This shifts power by making you feel cruel for asserting boundaries. The manipulator presents themselves as helpless, wronged, or misunderstood. Victimhood can be genuine or strategic. Outsmarting this requires compassion without surrender. You acknowledge feelings without accepting responsibility for fixing them. Another manipulation technique is withholding. This includes silence withdrawal, affection, or information. The goal is to create discomfort, so you comply to restore connection. Withholding exploits fear of loss. Outsmarting it requires tolerance of discomfort. You allow space without chasing resolution. Another tactic is gaslighting. This involves denying reality, questioning your perception, or making you doubt your memory. Over time, this erodes self-trust. Gaslighting is powerful because it destabilizes identity. Outsmarting gaslighting requires grounding in facts, patterns, and external validation when needed. You trust consistent evidence over momentary confusion. Another common tactic is authority framing. Someone presents themselves as expert, superior, or unquestionable to bypass your judgment. Authority reduces questioning. Outsmarting this means separating confidence from credibility. You verify rather than submit. Another manipulation method is false dilemmas. You are presented with only two options, both favoring the manipulator. This limits perceived choice. False choices create pressure. Outsmarting them means asking what other options exist. Another tactic is emotional flooding, overwhelming you with emotion, anger, sadness, drama, so you cannot think clearly. Emotional intensity hijacks cognition. Outsmarting it requires staying grounded and not matching intensity. Another manipulation approach is moral framing. You are told that the right, good, or ethical thing is to comply. This frames disagreement as immorality. Moral pressure is powerful. Outsmarting it means separating values from demands. Values guide behavior. They are not weapons. Another subtle tactic is repetition. Saying something repeatedly until it feels true. Familiarity creates acceptance. Repetition is not evidence. Outsmarting repetition means questioning assumptions even when they feel familiar. The key principle in outsmarting manipulation is this. Manipulation requires emotional reaction. Awareness disrupts it. When you see the tactic, you stop responding automatically. You create space. Space restores choice. Another critical skill is boundary clarity. If you do not know your boundaries, others will test them. Clear boundaries reduce manipulation opportunities. Boundaries do not require justification. Justification invites negotiation. Another powerful practice is emotional neutrality. Manipulation feeds on emotional spikes. Neutral responses starve it. You do not explain excessively. You do not argue emotionally. You do not rush to soothe discomfort. Neutrality protects you. Another important skill is responding rather than reacting. You take time, even brief time, before replying. This pause allows awareness to catch up. Pauses are powerful. Another key is trusting patterns over promises. Manipulators often promise change without consistent action. Patterns reveal truth. Consistency matters more than words. Another practice is strengthening self-trust. Manipulation works best when you doubt yourself. The more you trust your perception, the less leverage manipulators have. Self-trust is defense. Another essential element is managing your own needs. When you are desperate for approval, belonging, or validation, you are easier to manipulate. Wholeness reduces vulnerability. Another skill is knowing when to disengage. Some manipulators escalate when challenged. The smartest move is often distance. Distance is not defeat. It is strategy. Another powerful principle is not trying to expose manipulation publicly. Exposure often triggers retaliation. Quiet boundaries are more effective. Calm firmness speaks louder than confrontation. Another key is not trying to change manipulators. Change requires self-awareness and willingness. Your job is protection, not reform. Protection preserves energy. Another subtle tactic manipulators use is intermittent reinforcement, alternating kindness and withdrawal. This creates emotional addiction. Outsmarting it requires consistency in your own behavior and limits. Another important practice is documenting reality when patterns repeat. Writing things down grounds perception. Grounding prevents confusion. Another critical insight is that manipulators often accuse others of manipulation. This projection confuses victims. Awareness neutralizes projection. Another powerful habit is aligning with values. When decisions are value-driven, manipulation loses grip. Values are anchors. Another element is emotional independence. You stop outsourcing self-worth. Emotional independence makes manipulation ineffective. Another key is clarity in communication. Clear statements reduce misinterpretation. For example, "I am not available for that," rather than vague excuses. Clarity prevents pressure. Another advanced skill is noticing how you feel after interactions. Manipulative interactions leave you confused, drained, or doubting yourself. Your body knows. Trust it. Another principle is recognizing that manipulation thrives in secrecy. Transparency with trusted people reduces its power. Support restores perspective. Another important step is practicing saying no calmly. No is a complete sentence. No does not require explanation. Another advanced tactic is slow agreement. You do not say yes immediately. You say, "I will think about it." Time dissolves manipulation. Another key is recognizing emotional hooks. Manipulators push specific buttons. Awareness of your triggers protects you. Triggers are entry points. Another important practice is refusing to debate your boundaries. Boundaries are not arguments. Debate invites erosion. Another subtle insight is that manipulators often escalate when losing control. Awareness helps you stay firm. Escalation is confirmation. Another key is accepting discomfort. Manipulation relies on your desire to relieve discomfort quickly. Endurance defeats manipulation. Another important principle is that you do not owe access to everyone. Access is earned. Limited access reduces vulnerability. Another powerful habit is self-reflection after interactions. You learn and refine awareness. Learning compounds. Outsmarting manipulation without becoming manipulative is about integrity, intelligence, and self-respect. You do not control others. You control your response. You remain calm while others push. You remain clear while others confuse. You remain grounded while others escalate. This combination makes you extremely difficult to manipulate. In the next part, you will learn how to read situations before they escalate. You will see how early signals allow you to stay one step ahead. This is where foresight replaces reaction, and where intelligence becomes proactive rather than defensive. Most situations do not explode suddenly. They build quietly. Tension rises in small increments. Signals appear long before consequences do. The reason most people feel blindsided is not because there were no warnings, but because they were not paying attention. Outsmarting any person or situation requires foresight. Foresight is not prediction. It is perception. It is the ability to notice subtle shifts before they harden into conflict. Loss or crisis. Escalation is a process. Every escalation follows a pattern. First, there is discomfort, then misalignment, then emotional charge, then reaction. By the time reaction happens, control is already compromised. The real advantage exists in the early stages when intervention is still easy. The first signal of escalation is a change in emotional tone. Conversations feel slightly tighter. Humor disappears. Responses become shorter or sharper. Energy shifts. These changes are often dismissed as mood or stress. They are not random. They are indicators. Emotion always moves before behavior. If you learn to track emotional tone, you gain early warning. Another early signal is rigidity. When people stop being flexible, they are under internal pressure. They repeat positions. They resist alternatives. They become more absolute in language. Rigidity signals threat perception. Threat perception precedes escalation. Another signal is speed. When situations accelerate, unnaturally urgency appears. Decisions are pushed. Deadlines feel sudden. Pressure increases. Speed is often used to bypass reflection. Acceleration is rarely neutral. It usually serves someone's agenda or emotion. Another warning sign is withdrawal. Silence, avoidance, or reduced engagement often precede conflict. People withdraw when they feel overwhelmed, resentful, or unsure how to express something. Withdrawal is not calm. It is unresolved tension. Another subtle signal is inconsistency. Stories change, details shift, explanations vary. Inconsistency often signals internal conflict or strategic positioning. Consistency indicates stability. Inconsistency indicates pressure. Another early indicator is emotional leakage. Small comments, sarcasm, sighs, eye rolls, passive remarks. These are leaks from unexpressed emotion. Leaks mean pressure is building. Another signal is loss of curiosity. When people stop asking questions and start making statements, escalation is closer. Curiosity requires safety. Statements often signal defense. Defensiveness precedes conflict. Another warning sign is moral framing. When situations shift from discussion to right and wrong, escalation is near. Moral framing reduces flexibility and increases emotion. Morality hardens positions. Another signal is triangulation. People start involving others indirectly. Complaints are shared sideways rather than addressed directly. Triangulation spreads tension. Another early indicator is boundary testing. Small pushes, subtle oversteps, jokes that cross lines. These test tolerance. Testing precedes escalation. Another signal is physiological. You feel tension in your body. Tightness, restlessness, shallow breathing. Your body often detects escalation before your mind does. The body notices its patterns quickly. Trust it. Reading situations early requires slowing your own internal pace. If you are rushed, distracted, or emotionally reactive, you miss signals. Calm attention is the foundation of foresight. Calm sees more. Another critical skill is pattern recognition. You ask yourself, have I seen this before? What happened last time this tone appeared? What usually follows this behavior? Patterns predict outcomes. Another powerful practice is separating facts from atmosphere. Facts may seem neutral, while atmosphere shifts. Atmosphere often matters more. Atmosphere drives behavior. Another important aspect is noticing who is gaining or losing control. Escalation often occurs when someone feels their control slipping. Control loss triggers reaction. Reaction escalates situations. Another signal is increased justification. When people explain excessively, they are often defending internally. Defense indicates threat. Another warning sign is urgency without clarity. When urgency rises, but objectives remain vague, escalation is likely. Clarity reduces. Escalation. Another subtle signal is humor changing tone. Humor becomes sarcastic or pointed. Humor often masks aggression. Masked aggression still escalates. Another signal is narrowing perspective. People stop acknowledging nuance. Everything becomes simplified. Simplification increases conflict. Another important indicator is emotional contagion. You notice yourself feeling agitated, anxious, or defensive without clear reason. This often means escalation energy is present. Energy transfers. Awareness interrupts. Transfer reading situations early also requires managing your own ego. Ego wants to engage, prove, or defend. Ego-driven engagement blinds foresight. Neutrality preserves vision. Another key skill is asking clarifying questions early. Simple, calm questions often diffuse escalation by bringing hidden tension into the open. Questions create space. Another important practice is addressing process rather than content. You comment on what is happening rather than what is being argued. For example, "It seems like tension is rising here." This interrupts. Escalation. Another signal is shifting alliances. People subtly align or distance. Alignment changes often precede conflict. Social shifts matter. Another warning sign is emotional imbalance. One person carries most of the emotional charge, while others disengage. This imbalance creates instability. Imbalance escalates. Another indicator is repeated misunderstanding. When people talk past each other, escalation grows. Misunderstanding increases frustration. Clarification reduces friction. Another subtle sign is loss of empathy. People stop acknowledging each other's perspective. Empathy loss precedes aggression. Another key is noticing internal pressure to respond immediately. This pressure often signals manipulation or escalation. Tactics. Pressure is information. Another practice is pausing before responding, even when things seem calm. Pauses allow you to sense undercurrents. Undercurrents matter. Another signal is boundary erosion. When boundaries blur, escalation follows. Clear boundaries stabilize. Another warning sign is unresolved past conflict resurfacing. Old issues add fuel. Unresolved issues never disappear. Another indicator is emotional repetition. The same complaint resurfaces repeatedly. Repetition signals unmet needs. Unmet needs escalate. Another subtle sign is tone mismatch. Words say one thing, tone says. Another tone reveals truth. Another key skill is staying present without intervening prematurely. Not all tension needs action. Sometimes observation is enough. Discernment matters. Another important practice is preparing exits. Knowing when and how to disengage prevents escalation. Exit strategies preserve control. Another signal is public exposure. Issues are raised publicly rather than privately. Public stakes escalate emotion. Privacy reduces escalation. Another indicator is comparison language. Statements like "everyone thinks" or "no, one agrees" increase tension. Generalization fuels conflict. Another subtle sign is exhaustion. Tired systems escalate faster. Fatigue lowers tolerance. Rest reduces escalation risk. Another important practice is tracking your own thresholds. Knowing when you become reactive allows early re-regulation. Self-awareness is foresight. Another powerful insight is that escalation feeds on reaction. When you do not react, escalation loses momentum. Non-reaction is strategic. Another skill is naming the pattern gently. You reflect what you notice without blame. Naming brings awareness. Another practice is choosing timing wisely. Address issues before they intensify, not during peaks. Timing is leverage. Another key is not matching intensity. Matching intensity doubles escalation. Calm reduces amplitude. Another insight is that not all escalations are negative. Some signal necessary change. Awareness allows constructive handling. Constructive escalation leads to resolution. Another important skill is trusting intuition without panic. Intuition alerts you. Awareness guides response. Another practice is reflection after situations. You review signals you noticed and missed. Reflection sharpens foresight. Reading situations before they escalate is about staying present, patient, and perceptive. You do not rush to control. You observe, align, and respond. Early response is gentle. Late response is forceful. As you master this skill, you notice something important. Situations that once felt overwhelming become manageable. Conflicts soften. Pressure decreases, not because life changed, but because you saw earlier in the next part. You will learn how to think strategically under pressure. You will combine foresight with decision-making to stay mentally one step ahead when stakes are high. This is where intelligence becomes proactive and where control becomes consistent. Pressure changes how people think. It compresses time, narrows perception, and amplifies emotion. Under pressure, most people default to habits, defend ego, and chase relief rather than results. Strategic thinking is the ability to remain clear when pressure is highest and to choose actions that create advantage rather than short-term comfort. Strategy under pressure is not about brilliance. It is about structure. The first principle is this: pressure does not demand speed. It demands clarity. Speed without clarity produces mistakes. Clarity creates effective speed. When you feel pressure rising, your first move is not to act, but to stabilize your internal state. Regulation precedes strategy. A regulated mind can hold multiple variables at once. A reactive mind collapses options. To regulate quickly, you slow breathing, ground posture, and widen attention. This takes seconds, but changes everything. Once regulated, you shift to assessment. Strategic thinkers ask a small set of questions repeatedly. What is actually happening? What matters most right now? What is the real risk? Where is leverage? These questions cut through noise. Pressure floods. It's the environment with irrelevant information, opinions, urgency, and emotion. Strategy filters aggressively. You ignore what does not change outcomes. You focus on what does. Another core principle is separating urgency from importance. Urgency screams. Importance whispers. Many people confuse the two and act on what feels loud rather than what matters. Strategic thinkers resist artificial urgency. They ask, what happens if I wait? Often the answer reveals leverage. Another essential skill is sequencing. Under pressure, people try to do everything at once. Strategy orders actions. You decide what comes first, second, and later. Sequencing reduces overwhelm and preserves momentum. You do the next right thing, not everything. Strategic thinking also involves anticipating second-order effects. You consider not only what will happen if you act, but what will happen after that. Many poor decisions solve a short-term problem and create a larger one. Thinking one move ahead is advantage. Thinking 2 moves ahead is power. Another key principle is preserving optionality. Under pressure, people lock themselves into positions. Strategy keeps options open. You avoid irreversible moves unless necessary. Options are insurance. Another important element is choosing positioning over confrontation. Direct confrontation often escalates pressure. Positioning changes the field quietly. You adjust timing, framing, or environment. So, outcomes favor you. Position beats force. Another skill is recognizing pressure tactics. Pressure is often used deliberately to rush you into compliance. When you feel pushed, you slow down. You ask clarifying questions. You create space. Space weakens pressure. Another principle is focusing on controllables. Under pressure, the mind fixates on what it cannot control. Strategy redirects attention to what you can influence right now. Control restores confidence. Another essential skill is resource management. Pressure drains energy. Strategic thinkers protect energy for critical moments. They do not waste it on low-impact conflict. Energy allocation is strategy. Another important aspect is perspective. Pressure shrinks time horizons. Everything feels immediate and permanent. Strategy expands perspective. You zoom out and see the larger arc. Perspective reduces panic. Another key is emotional containment. You allow emotion without letting it dictate behavior. Emotion provides information but does not command action. Information informs. Strategy, another powerful technique, is scenario planning. You mentally map a few likely outcomes and prepare responses. This reduces surprise and speeds action. Preparation reduces stress. Another principle is simplicity. Under pressure, complex plans fail. Strategy simplifies. You choose clear actions with high impact. Simplicity scales. Another critical skill is communication discipline. Under pressure, people over-explain, justify, or argue. Strategic communicators are concise, calm, and precise. Precision commands authority. Another important element is timing. Acting too early or too late both carry risk. Strategy waits for the moment when leverage is highest. Timing multiplies effect. Another principle is neutrality. Emotional neutrality allows you to read others accurately. When you are emotionally invested, perception distorts. Neutrality preserves. Clarity. Another skill is recognizing when not to act. In some high-pressure situations, the smartest move is patience. Pressure often resolves itself when not. Fed non-action can be strategic. Another important practice is grounding decisions in values. Values act as shortcuts under pressure. When you know what you stand for, decisions become clearer. Values reduce hesitation. Another key element is trust and recovery. Fear of mistakes slows thinking. When you trust your ability to recover, you act decisively. Decisiveness creates momentum. Another principle is learning from pressure. Each high-pressure moment teaches you about your triggers, strengths, and blind spots. Reflection turns pressure into training. Training builds resilience. Another skill is managing attention externally and internally. You track the environment while monitoring your state. This dual awareness keeps you adaptive. Awareness is control. Another important aspect is recognizing escalation thresholds. You know when to push, when to pause, and when to disengage. Discernment prevents damage. Another principle is maintaining dignity. Under pressure, people sacrifice integrity for relief. Strategic thinkers protect dignity even when stressed. Dignity preserves. Long-term power. Another skill is using questions strategically. Questions slow interactions, reveal information, and shift. Pressure back to others. Questions create leverage. Another important element is resisting false binaries. Pressure frames choices as all or nothing. Strategy finds middle paths and third options. Options reduce risk. Another principle is focusing on outcomes, not emotions. You acknowledge feelings, but choose actions based on desired results. Results require discipline. Another skill is maintaining consistency. Erratic behavior under pressure signals weakness. Consistency builds trust and authority. Consistency stabilizes situations. Another important practice is rehearsing pressure scenarios. Mental rehearsal builds familiarity. Familiarity reduces fear. Reduced fear improves performance. Another principle is aligning allies quietly. Under pressure, you identify who supports your goals and coordinate subtly. Alignment strengthens position. Another skill is recognizing sunk cost traps. Pressure tempts you to double down on failing paths. Strategy cuts losses early. Adaptation beats stubbornness. Another important element is silence. Silence under pressure unsettles others and buys time. Time creates advantage. Another principle is focusing on learning rather than winning. Learning improves future outcomes. Growth compounds. Another skill is maintaining physical composure. Body language communicates control or panic. Controlled posture projects confidence. Projection influences others. Another important aspect is humility. You accept that you may not see everything. This openness prevents blind spots. Humility improves accuracy. Another principle is choosing clarity over comfort. Comfort seeks relief. Clarity seeks truth. Truth guides strategy. Another skill is separating personal feelings from professional decisions. Personalization clouds judgment. Detachment clarifies. Another important practice is post-pressure review. You analyze what worked, what did not, and why. Analysis refines skill. Strategic. Thinking under pressure is not about being cold. It is about being effective. You remain human, but not hijacked. You think clearly when others rush. You choose wisely when others react. You stay composed when others panic. This is not talent, it is trained behavior. In the next part, you will learn how to stay mentally one step ahead in life and work. You will integrate awareness, foresight, and strategy into everyday situations. This is where intelligence becomes consistent, and where advantage becomes natural. Staying mentally one step ahead is not about outthinking everyone around you or constantly predicting the future. It is about positioning yourself so that you are rarely surprised and never overwhelmed. It is the result of awareness, preparation, and disciplined thinking practiced consistently over time. Most people live reactively. They wait for problems to appear before thinking. They respond to pressure after it escalates. They adjust only after damage is done. Staying one step ahead reverses this pattern. You prepare before pressure arrives. You notice shifts early. You respond while options are still open. This is quiet advantage. The foundation of staying ahead is situational awareness. You pay attention to context, not just content. You notice how environments change, how people behave under stress, and how patterns repeat. You are not lost in distraction. Attention is currency. Where your attention goes, your advantage follows. Another core principle is anticipation. Anticipation is not anxiety. Anxiety imagines worst-case scenarios. Anticipation observes trends and prepares calmly. You ask what is likely to happen next based on what I see now. Likely outcomes matter more than hoped outcomes. Staying ahead also requires mental flexibility. Life and work environments change constantly. Rigid thinking breaks under change. Flexible thinking adapts. Adaptation beats prediction. You let go of outdated assumptions quickly. You do not cling to how things used to work. You update your mental models as new information appears. Another essential element is proactive regulation. You do not wait until stress overwhelms you to calm down. You maintain a regulated baseline. This allows clear thinking even when demands increase. Calm is maintained, not summoned. Another key skill is information filtering. Modern environments flood you with data, opinions, and noise. Staying ahead requires discerning what matters and ignoring the rest. Noise drains energy. Focus preserves it. You ask, does this information help me decide, act, or prepare? If not, you let it go. Another important principle is pattern tracking. You observe recurring dynamics in people, projects, and systems. Patterns reveal more than isolated events. Once you see patterns, you stop being surprised. Another aspect of staying ahead is strategic patience. Many opportunities reveal themselves only if you wait. Rushing often closes doors. Patience creates timing. Another essential skill is preparing buffers. You leave margin in schedules, finances, and energy. Margin absorbs shock. People without margin break under pressure. Margin equals resilience. Another key element is emotional independence. You do not let others' emotional states dictate your actions. You stay grounded even when others panic, complain, or escalate. Emotional independence protects clarity. Another important practice is scenario awareness. You mentally note best case, likely case, and worst case outcomes without fixating. This allows rapid adjustment when reality unfolds. Prepared minds move faster. Another skill is recognizing leverage points. Leverage is where small actions create large effects. You look for these points rather than expending energy everywhere. Efficiency beats effort. Another principle is choosing long-term advantage over short-term comfort. Staying ahead often means doing uncomfortable things early, so you avoid crisis later. Early discomfort prevents later pain. Another important element is disciplined routines. Consistent habits reduce decision fatigue and preserve mental energy. When basics are automated, you have more capacity for complexity. Structure supports creativity. Another key skill is noticing early warning signals in yourself. Fatigue, irritability, reduced focus, and emotional reactivity signal overload. You respond early. Early response prevents collapse. Another principle is aligning with reality rather than resisting it. Staying ahead requires accurate assessment, not wishful thinking. You accept what is and work from there. Reality is leverage. Another important practice is continuous learning. You do not rely on past success alone. You refine skills, update knowledge, and stay curious. Curiosity keeps you adaptive. Another key element is managing commitments. Overcommitment destroys foresight. You protect time for thinking, reflection, and rest. Thinking time is strategic. Another principle is asking better questions. Instead of asking, "How do I fix this?" you ask, "What created this?" Root causes matter. Understanding prevents repetition. Another important aspect is social awareness. You understand group dynamics, power structures, and incentives. You know who influences decisions and how. Influence follows awareness. Another key skill is clarity of priorities. When everything feels important, nothing is. You define what truly matters and let the rest stay secondary. Clarity reduces overwhelm. Another principle is trusting process over impulse. You follow systems that work rather than reacting to momentary emotion. Systems outperform willpower. Another important element is reducing reactivity to success as well as failure. Overconfidence can be as dangerous as fear. Staying ahead requires steady evaluation regardless of outcome. Balance preserves judgment. Another skill is strategic communication. You share information intentionally. You do not overshare or withhold unnecessarily. You choose timing and framing wisely. Communication shapes outcomes. Another principle is preparing exits. You always know how to disengage if necessary. Exit awareness reduces anxiety and improves decision-making. Options reduce fear. Another important aspect is aligning actions with values. Values provide consistency when circumstances change. They anchor decisions. Anchored decisions build trust. Another key skill is monitoring energy cycles. You plan demanding tasks when energy is highest. You rest when it drops. Energy management sustains performance. Another principle is learning from others' mistakes. You observe failures without judgment and extract lessons. Observation saves cost. Another important practice is minimizing ego involvement. Ego clouds foresight. Neutral self-assessment improves accuracy. Accuracy keeps you ahead. Another key element is resisting urgency culture. You do not equate busyness with effectiveness. You prioritize thoughtful action. Thoughtful action scales. Another principle is maintaining physical health. The brain performs better when the body is supported. Body health supports mental edge. Another important aspect is reflection. You regularly review decisions, outcomes, and patterns. Reflection turns experience into strategy. Experience alone is not wisdom. Another key skill is recognizing diminishing returns. When additional effort no longer improves outcomes, knowing when to stop is intelligence. Another principle is humility. You accept that you can be wrong. This openness prevents blind spots. Blind spots cause surprise. Another important practice is protecting attention. You limit distractions and interruptions. Protected attention builds advantage. Another key element is emotional resilience. You recover quickly from setbacks. Fast recovery keeps momentum. Momentum sustains advantage. Another principle is simplifying complexity. You break large challenges into manageable parts. Simplification restores control. Another important aspect is self-leadership. You guide yourself consistently rather than relying on external pressure. Self-leadership creates stability. Another key skill is maintaining curiosity under pressure. Curiosity prevents panic and opens options. Curiosity is adaptive. Another principle is integrity. You do not compromise core principles for short-term gain. Integrity builds long-term power. Another important practice is recognizing when to seek advice. Staying ahead does not mean doing everything alone. Perspective expands vision. Another key element is trusting timing. You do not force outcomes prematurely. Timing multiplies effort. Another principle is embracing uncertainty without paralysis. You act without complete information when necessary. Action builds clarity. Another important aspect is cultivating calm presence. Calm presence influences environments and people. Presence shapes reality. Staying mentally one step ahead is not flashy. It is quiet, consistent, and powerful. You do not dominate situations. You navigate them. You see earlier? You think clearer? You respond wiser. This is not luck. It is practiced awareness. In the final part, you will learn how to become calm, intelligent, and unpredictable. You will integrate everything into a mindset that others cannot easily read or manipulate. This is where mastery becomes identity, and where advantage becomes natural. The highest level of mental mastery is not dominance, speed, or control over others. It is becoming calm, intelligent, and unpredictable at the same time. This combination makes you extremely difficult to manipulate pressure or outmaneuver because people cannot read. You easily in situations do not destabilize you. Unpredictability does not mean chaos. It means you are not driven by emotional reflexes, patterns, or expectations. You do not respond the way people assume you will. And because of that, you keep advantage without force. Most people are predictable because they are emotional. Trigger the emotion, and you trigger the response. Push fear, they retreat. Push ego, they defend. Push validation, they comply. Once someone understands this pattern, control becomes easy. Calm breaks. It's predictability. When you are calm, you do not react immediately. That pause disrupts expectation. Others do not know what move is coming next. This uncertainty shifts power in your favor. Intelligence then guides your response. Not raw intellect, but situational intelligence. You understand context, motives, timing, and consequences. You choose responses deliberately rather than impulsively. Unpredictability emerges naturally when you are calm and intelligent because you are not following scripts. Becoming this way begins with internal consistency. You are stable inside regardless of what happens outside. When others escalate, you remain grounded. When others rush, you slow down. When others push, you observe. This contrast creates presence. Presence is felt before it is understood. Another key element is emotional neutrality. You feel emotions, but you do not broadcast them uncontrollably. People cannot easily read your next move because it is not driven by visible emotion. Neutrality protects information. Asymmetry is advantage. Becoming unpredictable also means you stop over-explaining yourself. Over-explanation reveals intention, insecurity, and direction. Calm intelligence communicates with clarity, not volume. Less said leaves more unknown. Another important aspect is selective engagement. You do not react to everything. You choose when to engage and when to disengage. This selectivity makes your responses harder to anticipate. Predictable people respond to every stimulus. Strategic people do not. Another key is values-based decision-making. When decisions come from values rather than emotion, they appear unpredictable to those who expect reactive behavior. Values anchor behavior. Internally, while confusing those looking for patterns, another important element is comfort with silence. Silence creates ambiguity. Ambiguity disrupts others' ability to predict you. Silence also gives you time to assess. Those who fear silence reveal themselves quickly. Another principle is adaptability. You are not rigid. You adjust based on new information. This flexibility makes you difficult to corner. Rigid minds can be predicted. Flexible minds cannot. Becoming calm, intelligent, and unpredictable also means letting go of the need to be understood. The desire to be understood pushes you to explain, justify, and defend. This reveals too much clarity for yourself matters more than clarity for others. Another aspect is emotional independence. You do not depend on others' approval, disapproval, or reaction to regulate yourself. Independence breaks manipulation. Manipulation requires dependency. Another key element is internal confidence. Confidence does not announce itself. It is steady, quiet, and self-contained. This confidence allows you to wait rather than rush. Waiting unnerves those who rely on pressure. Another principle is observing before acting. You let others reveal intentions, patterns, and emotional states. Observation gives you information without cost. Information is leverage. Another important skill is maintaining consistent demeanor. Your external calm stays steady regardless of internal processing. This consistency prevents others from reading shifts. Emotional tells. Reveal strategy. Control of tells preserves advantage. Another element is strategic unpredictability. You sometimes act sooner, sometimes later. Sometimes you engage directly, sometimes indirectly. This variation prevents pattern formation. Patterns create vulnerability. Another key principle is humility. You do not assume superiority. You remain open to learning. This openness prevents blind spots. Blind spots make people predictable. Another important aspect is restraint. You do not show all your capability. You do not reveal all your thinking. You keep reserve. Reserve is power. Another skill is alignment. You align actions with long-term outcomes rather than short-term reactions. This alignment may surprise those expecting immediate emotional responses. Long-term thinking disrupts short-term manipulation. Another principle is emotional containment. You can be empathetic without absorbing emotion. This allows connection without compromise. Containment maintains. Clarity. Another important element is decisiveness when it matters. Unpredictability does not mean indecision. When you decide, you do so clearly and calmly. Calm decisiveness signals authority. Another skill is choosing simplicity. Complex emotional explanations confuse others but simplify predictability. Simple calm statements create ambiguity. Ambiguity protects position. Another principle is resisting the urge to correct everything. Correction reveals priorities and sensitivities. Sometimes letting things pass preserves advantage. Not every error needs response. Another aspect is trusting intuition without announcing it. You act on insight quietly. Quiet action avoids resistance. Another key element is emotional resilience. You recover quickly from surprises. Fast recovery prevents others from exploiting disruption. Recovery speed is strength. Another principle is self-leadership. You guide your own state rather than being guided by environment. Self. Leadership creates stability. Another important aspect is integrity. You do not manipulate, deceive, or exploit. Ethical consistency creates internal calm. Internal calm fuels clarity. Clarity fuels unpredictability. Another key is knowing when to be predictable. Predictability can be strategic when it builds trust. You choose predictability deliberately, not unconsciously. Choice is control. Another principle is awareness of timing. You act when leverage is highest, not when emotion peaks. Timing multiplies. Impact. Another important skill is not announcing plans. Plans spoken prematurely invite interference. Execution speaks louder. Another element is curiosity. You remain curious rather than defensive. Curiosity opens options. Options reduce vulnerability. Another principle is acceptance. You accept that not everything can be controlled. This acceptance prevents desperate behavior. Desperation is predictable. Another key is emotional regulation under observation. When others watch you under pressure and seek calm, they reassess assumptions. Breaking creates advantage. Another important aspect is consistency of values paired with flexibility of tactics. Values stay steady, tactics change. This combination is hard to predict. Another principle is respecting complexity. You do not oversimplify people or situations. Respecting complexity prevents miscalculation. Misjudgment creates risk. Another key element is internal alignment. When thoughts, emotions, and actions align, you move cleanly. Clean movement is efficient. Another principle is choosing dignity over dominance. Dominance provokes resistance. Dignity commands respect. Respect protects position. Another aspect is strategic empathy. You understand others' perspectives without surrendering yours. Understanding informs. Strategy. Another key skill is knowing when unpredictability is unnecessary. Sometimes transparency builds better outcomes. You choose wisely. Wisdom is selective unpredictability. Becoming calm, intelligent, and unpredictable is not about games. It is about mastery of self. When you master your self-situations and people lose their power over you, you are no longer reactive. You are no longer rushed. You are no longer easily read. You move through life with quiet confidence. Others feel your presence even. When you say little, you see before others see. You choose before others react. You adapt before others realize change is needed. This is not manipulation. This is awareness, discipline, and control. And once this mindset becomes who you are, you no longer need to outsmart. Life meets you on your terms.